Good morning, everybody. Hello. On behalf of the California Department of Transportation, I would like to welcome you to today's Caltrans Broadband Industry Meeting and the Broadband for All Roundtable. My name is Elizabeth Dewar, and I'm the Caltrans Broadband Facilities Coordinator and your facilitator for today. For those who have joined us for past meetings, I hope you found that the information that we provide has been helpful and that you've benefited as much from these discussions as I have. For those of you who are joining for the first time, let me start by reviewing why we're here today. The purpose of this meeting is to share updates on the broadband efforts throughout the state of California. It's also to engage in open discussion on facilitating broadband infrastructure deployment within the state highway right-of-way and throughout the state of California. Before we get started, I would like to cover some meeting logistics. The virtual venue for today is WebEx Events. It is similar to other online meeting applications that you may be familiar with, including WebEx Meetings, Zoom, or MS Teams, with the features including Q&A as well as hand raising. I would like to remind the panelists and presenters to please be sure you are muted if you are not speaking. Attendees, you will not be able to unmute yourselves, so our host today, Yolanda Torres, will be supporting us with this. If you have a question, we ask that you use the Q&A box. The Q&A boxes may be found along the bottom right side of your screen. If you do not see these features, you will see them by clicking on the triple dots, which will show you more options. There will also be opportunities to ask questions throughout the meeting. At these times, we will ask you to raise your hand and we will unmute you. And finally, for any questions not answered today, we will be following up with responses after the meeting. Let's go ahead and get started. To share opening remarks, we are honored to have Deputy Secretary for Innovative Mobility and Solutions from the California State Transportation Agency, Lori Pepper, the Secretary of the California Government Operations Agency, Amy Tong, Acting Director of the California Department of Transportation, Stephen Keck, and President and CEO of the California Emerging Technology Fund, Sunny Wright McPeak. I want to thank all of our guest speakers this morning for your time today, and I'd like to welcome Lori Pepper. Lori?
Thanks so much, Elizabeth. Good morning, everyone. I don't have prepared remarks, and as you probably saw on the agenda, we have a lot of updates to go through, so I will be very, very quick. I really want to thank all of you for attending. I want to thank everybody who will be presenting today, including all of our friends and colleagues at Caltrans, GovOps, DGS, DETF, Golden State Net. I'm forgetting a whole bunch of people, but as you'll see, the issue of broadband deployment and adoption is one that runs through so many different departments and agencies at the state, and we could not do it without our private sector partners either. So thank you so much. I feel like the projects that you're going to hear from, we are making really good progress, and I'm excited to see more of where we are and where we're going. So thank you all so much.
Thank you, Lori. Secretary Tong.
Yes, thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you, Deputy Secretary Pepper. I'm going to follow her to give a very brief remarks because I want to save a lot of time for all you all. There's a lot of good content. I'm really, really excited about today's forum. And thank you, Caltrans, for inviting me and the other state partners today to have this Broadband for All Roundtable discussion as part of your biannual broadband industry meeting. We are pleased to see so many internet service providers and regional partners united around a common goal to close the digital divide and foster this digital equity and inclusion in the state. As you know, broadband is essential to modern life with school, work, healthcare, increasingly and completely available online as a public health is imperative. Californians' ability to access and use broadband became the differences between being able to fully engage in life and being cut off. And yet many Californians still do not have access to what they need. So it is definitely time to close the digital divide. We face complex and deep-rooted challenges to delivering broadband for all. We recognize achieving broadband for all requires partnership and with the support from all of you, the broadband industry, federal, local, and tribal governments. Thankfully, we are at the moment in time where federal and state policies, priorities, and funding are all aligned around the goal we are here to share. And the state's Broadband for All program acknowledges that broadband access, adoption, and training are essential components of digital equity. Today, you will hear about progress that California Broadband Council members have made on the implementation of the Broadband for All Action Plan. You will hear status update from the state's historic $6 billion broadband investment in middle-mile infrastructure and last-mile grants program that the governor and the legislature created and funded last July in the passing of Senate Bill 156. To support these efforts and the recent federal bipartisan infrastructure legislation allocated an additional $62 billion to further support states through a variety of programs to making home internet service device affordable and to enable states to build on and expand their digital equity efforts. The state is actively pursuing these funds in support of our digital equity efforts and often the effort that you are doing across California. We are eager to expand our partnership and align efforts with yours to achieve broadband for all in California. Thank you. Back to you, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much, Secretary Tong, again for being here today and for those words. I'm going to turn it over to Acting Director of Caltrans, Stephen Keck.
Thank you, Elizabeth, and hello and good morning to all of you. As the Acting Director, before we get going, I do want to extend my thanks to Lori Pepper, to Amy Tong, and to Sunny Wright-McPeak for joining Caltrans here today. Their leadership and support are really invaluable and greatly appreciated, especially with this broadband effort that we're focused on today. I'm also pleased to welcome representatives from the California Department of Technology, the California Public Utilities Commission, California Emerging Technology Fund. They're all here today to share information on the state's Broadband for All initiative and the ongoing efforts. And I want to extend a welcome to all of the industry partners and stakeholders that have joined us today. Thank you very much for your participation. For our part, Caltrans is going to be sharing an update on broadband accommodations within the state highway right-of-way. So today is really going to provide us all an opportunity to talk about how we can best work together with that focus on serving the underconnected and unconnected communities that we still have in California. Also, we're going to talk about how we can each fill our roles and do our part to ensure the success of this broadband initiative. So expanding that broadband continues to be at the forefront when we address things like healthcare, education, the workforce in the state that we have right now. Things we don't even know about yet. If you think about 2 years ago, before we started this huge telework effort, we don't even know what's coming next. So we have a responsibility and an interest in facilitating the installation of digital communications throughout the state. For Caltrans, that means collaborating with our agency partners, industry, such as yourself, to identify those opportunities to achieving the goals that will further the broadband initiative. So we're focused on closing that digital divide for residents and businesses, but also enabling Caltrans ourselves to use the technological innovations to improve safety and mobility of California travelers. So I want to again thank everyone, including our guest presenters today, the broadband partners that have joined us, and our stakeholders. Thank you all for being here today and actively participating in the broadband efforts throughout California.
Thank you, Director Keck. And now we'd like to hear a few words from Sunny. Sunny,
Thank you, Elizabeth. What a pleasure it is to join you again, to thank you for your leadership and to be among these distinguished California leaders in saying a few words of welcome. I love saying Secretary Tong. I love that promotion, and so thank you, Amy, and Deputy Secretary Pepper, and Acting Director Keck. Beautiful words. I appreciate your vision and your continued leadership from now Secretary Omishakin. I think most people on this call realize that I've had an opportunity to work with Caltrans very closely in the past. I was honored to be Secretary of Business, Transportation, Housing a few years ago. And I'm just extraordinarily appreciative of the leadership that Caltrans is providing. So Elizabeth and Stephen and the entire team, all 12 districts, amazing. I also want to acknowledge that with the California Department of Technology, the California Public Utilities Commission, the entire governor's cabinet, the legislature, and CETF has the honor to serve on the California Broadband Council, that from my perspective, and I think everyone at Caltrans can attest that I'm pretty demanding. I expect the highest in service and leadership. I just want to say to all of you on this call today that the state, all state leaders in the administration, in the legislature, have stepped up. Literally, I told the Los Angeles Times this week, so you should note it on your calendar, that I could not ask more of the state of California. That does not mean we do not have a lot of work to do. It means a huge amount of opportunity that is before us. I will say that the issues that sparked the establishment of these regular meetings have been worked through, and that's largely to your credit, Elizabeth, to the leadership from Caltrans. You will hear later today on a panel of the Affordable Connectivity Program. Chris Schmidt from District 11 Caltrans has actually been assigned to the San Diego Association of Governments. Really unprecedented kind of collaboration to work hand in hand, shoulder to shoulder on not only deployment but on adoption. And that is huge breakthrough. When I was secretary, some people would scratch their head when I used to say, the best trip is a virtual trip. But I want to repeat, the best trip is a virtual trip. If I can unload a vehicle trip from the surface transportation system, not only have we done something to relieve traffic, but to relieve an impact on the environment. And that is what our broadband initiative really entails here, and working aggressively to accommodate in the Caltrans rights of way and other state rights of way the deployment of broadband. I will also say that I am very pleased to report we released on Earth Day, literally just a couple of weeks ago, the results of a Caltrans grant to the Southern California Association of Governments, looking at the relationship between universal deployment of broadband and adoption and the potential reduction of vehicle trips and decrease in greenhouse gas emissions. And the bottom line was, in many, many different angles of analysis, that we can reduce greenhouse gas emissions with ubiquitous broadband and universal adoption of broadband by 1 to 15%. That's not insignificant. That actually exceeds what we're able to do with bike paths and trails, walking trails, those kinds of things. So the work we are doing here is not only to help in the deployment of broadband and to find ways in which we work together to really collaborate for middle mile and last mile. It also is our way of contributing to the fight against climate change. So with that, I want to come back and say to you, Elizabeth, thank you for your leadership personally, to Deputy Director, or actually I guess Acting Director at this point, Keck, and our colleagues in the state. Thank you for your leadership. To the internet service providers, we can't say enough. We appreciate your investment in California. You also know we have to figure out how we get to the hardest to reach communities together. And that's what this conversation will advance today.
Thank you. Thank you so much. To Deputy Secretary Pepper, to Secretary Tong, Acting Director Keck, and to Ms. McPeak. I want to thank you for being here today, for sharing those words. What a great way to start this meeting. It's got me all excited. I really enjoy meeting with you all every 6 months. And we are truly fortunate to have such excellent leaders and great champions. And thank you all for your vision and your wisdom on this. And your, as has been said, we have a lot of work to get ahead of us while we are making advances. There's no shortage of areas that we can continue to improve upon. So thank you again to all of our guest speakers for being here. Next on the agenda is Caltrans' broadband update. And I would like to introduce to you Tina Lucas. Tina is the Chief of the Office of Project Support in the Caltrans Division of Design. She is here today to share some information on our broadband accommodations policy. So thank you, Tina, for being here, and we will turn it over to you.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Elizabeth. Good morning. Happy Thursday, everyone. Once again, I would like to apologize. I don't have a web camera on my laptop, so I am going to unfortunately not be able to see all of your faces, and you won't be able to see mine. But let me get started here. As Elizabeth said, I am the Office Chief for Project Support in Caltrans Division of Design. My office is responsible for the encroachment and utility accommodation policies covered in Chapter 17 of the Project Development Procedures Manual. Given the increasing number of broadband installations in state highway right-of-way, both permit installations and broadband middle-mile network, Caltrans worked with FHWA to develop new encroachment policies and clarifications for wired broadband installations in the right-of-way, and I'm here to share those updates today. Okay, so the new and clarified policies were published in a memorandum on March 25th, 2022. The policies replace the existing policies in the Project Development Procedures Manual, Chapter 17, Section 2. The policies provide more flexibility for your installations while balancing the need to ensure the safety and operability of our highways. And that's not just safety for motorists, but also safety for your workers who will be maintaining these facilities. And finally, these policies, since they are for access controlled right-of-way, what that means is they apply to interstates, freeways, and expressways. For conventional highways, which many of these projects will be installed on, the existing policies in the encroachment permit manual still apply. We haven't changed those policies. The policy memo and attachments are available to download from the Caltrans Encroachment Permits website. I show the URLs here, and this information will be shared with you after this meeting, so you can access the memo. The first attachment is the signed memorandum that explains our process and reason for developing these policies. And once again, it's because, as we've previously heard from our distinguished guest speakers, right? Broadband is essential to work, education, health, and Caltrans is doing our part to make those installations easier to be accomplished within our right-of-way. The second attachment, attachment A, goes in more detail about the encroachment policy revisions. I'll touch upon a few of the key elements in a subsequent slide. And finally, attachment B provides guidance for installations on bridges. Okay. Next, I'd like to share a diagram that is part of attachment A, which very nicely illustrates the hierarchy for the preferred placement of these longitudinal installations. As shown in the diagram, The preferred location, whenever possible, is to go within this zone here, within 10 feet of the right-of-way line. If that preferred location is not feasible, then the secondary preference for placement of the broadband installation is in this next zone, which is from 10 feet off of the right-of-way line over here to the hinge point of the pavement. And if you're placing the broadband facility in this secondary zone, all you need to do is document the reason why it needs to be placed here and why it can't be placed in the preferred location. And finally, if you are proposing to place your broadband facilities within 3 to 4 feet, this hinge width here, which also may be where we have guardrail located, or underneath the pavement structure itself, then that would require an encroachment policy exception. So for most part, all it requires is some explanation of why you need to place it, where you need to place it, and hopefully that will be able to accommodate the majority of your installation. Okay, next, what are some key elements of our new policies? First and foremost, we've listened to your feedback, and through my time in this office and receiving, numerous exception requests related to this point, we realize that maintenance access points have been a critical need that were not previously allowed in access controlled right-of-way. So we have now provided more flexibility. Maintenance access points are allowed under certain criteria, and those are detailed in the memorandum and attachment A. Maintenance access points are not allowed at locations where access is needed from the main line or ramps of the interstate. The preferred location on interstate is to go at grade separated locations where it could be placed on the local road of an undercrossing or overcrossing or a frontage road. There is more flexibility if you are on a non-interstate route. Buried boxes, and by buried we mean covered with backfill or soil so that they're not visible to someone who might be interested in, vandalizing the installation. Those are not considered maintenance access points, so we encourage you to consider backfilling, covering those to prevent vandalism and wire theft, which will also help cut down on the maintenance needed for your facilities. And most importantly, FHWA doesn't consider buried boxes maintenance access points for purposes of complying with the criteria. So once again, there is more flexibility, and it can prevent the vandalism and wire theft, which unfortunately that does sometimes occur on our Caltrans facilities. And I would just like to emphasize a key point. FHWA approval is needed for broadband installations on interstate. So that would need to be factored into the development time for your projects. Once again, these very detailed policies of the different situations, criteria under which we allow maintenance access points on non-interstate routes, those are detailed in attachment A of the memo, which I shared the URLs previously. And that is really it in terms of the key updates that I wanted to share. And just a reminder, if you download Chapter 17 of the PDPM, in our eagerness to get these new policies out, we published them via memo. Chapter 17 has not yet been updated, so don't be alarmed if you compare these criteria, the new policies, to Chapter 17 and say, hey, what happened? 17's not updated. We will be updating 17, but we wanted to release this new guidance as soon as possible to assist all of you with your projects. And so with that, I will hand it back to Elizabeth. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Tina. Thank you so much. And we do have a few minutes Just a reminder to everybody, for those who may have joined a little bit late, I do want to share that we are recording this meeting just for your information. We also have the ability to respond to your questions if you enter it into the Q&A box. We are monitoring the question and answer box for any questions you might have. And since we do have a few minutes as well right now, if you have a question, please also feel free to raise your hand and we can unmute you and respond to any questions that way. So I want to just take just a moment here to give you all an opportunity to see if you have any questions about the information that was just shared with you this morning on Caltrans' broadband accommodations policy. And again, my thanks to Yolanda Torres for helping us to host this meeting behind the scenes, getting additional people added and registered as we present this morning, monitoring for hands raised to unmute them, and working with our guest speakers and presenters. So I don't see any questions in the Q&A, and I'm not seeing any hands right now. Yolanda, I want to turn to you, though, very briefly. Do you see any hands raised as the host?
No, I don't. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So with that, thank you again, Tina, for being here. Thank you for sharing that. Really appreciate that update this morning. Since our last meeting, there have been many developments in the efforts to expand broadband access throughout the state. And as shared in our meeting announcements, as part of today's meeting, Caltrans is hosting partners from around the state for a roundtable discussion about the state's Broadband for All program, the Middle-Mile Broadband Initiative, CPUC's Last Mile and Adoption programs, and other digital equity initiatives. So to facilitate this discussion, it's my pleasure to introduce to you the Deputy Director of Broadband and Digital Literacy from the California Department of Technology. Please welcome Scott Adams. Scott?
Hi, Elizabeth. Thank you so much. Wanted to extend just a much gratitude to our state leaders who came on today and really voiced the state's strong commitment to, advancing broadband throughout the state. Wanted to thank Caltrans in particular for sharing this time with us to embed the Broadband for All Roundtable content with our ISP partners, and want to definitely thank the ISP partners that are here today for the work that they have done to advance broadband across the state and to just issue a call to action that we're eager to continue to partner as we really capitalize on this moment to close the digital divide and foster digital equity throughout the state. I do want to note that this is the second of 4 roundtables that this state is hosting in the next couple weeks. The first one was with cities, counties, and broadband consortia and metropolitan planning organizations. We have this one today with ISPs. Later today, we'll convene with schools, libraries, and community-based organizations, and then next week with tribal governments. And really our focus is to, continue to do what we can to align with the whole host of partners that, are required to do the heavy lift that we're all assigned with doing. So if you could advance the next slide, please. As Elizabeth stated, really we're here today with other state partners, broadband council members, partner state agencies, and wanted to give you an update on the agenda. It's pretty packed. We're going to provide an update on the implementation of the Broadband for All Action Plan, an update on the work that's being done on the Middle-Mile Broadband Initiative. Our partners from the PUC are going to provide an update on the Last Mile and Adoption programs that they are administering. And then as Sonny McPeak mentioned, there'll be a section on the Affordable Connectivity Program and a panel, and then we will close out, as Secretary Tong stated, with a little update on the upcoming NTIA IIJA broadband programs. We're gonna stack the presentations one after the other, and staff will be monitoring questions that come in the chat, in the Q&A, and then at the end of the presentations, we'll do a big Q&A section. So just wanted to point that out. Next slide, please. Again, thank you. Did want to just state that, in my role, in the broadband officer's role, on broadband and digital literacy, our main goal is to help support the implementation of the state's Broadband for All program. That's really based on the foundation of promoting access to broadband infrastructure and service, helping to increase affordability and adoption of that service, and then fostering and promoting digital equity inclusion throughout the state. Next slide, please. Much of our work really stems and flows through the California Broadband Council, which has really been, at the state level, the main collaborative body working to promote broadband deployment and adoption throughout the state and in unserved areas as defined by the PUC. We're very pleased to have many members of the Broadband Council and other partners here today to talk about the work that they're doing. It would, I'd be remiss if I didn't say that, the pandemic and the governor's broadband executive order really refocused the work of the Broadband Council and the partner entities to really redouble their focus to close the digital divide. And the executive order, directed the Broadband Council to develop the Broadband for All action plan, which they did very significantly in partnership with many of you, providing input and feedback. Put that plan together in about 4 months during the pandemic, and that was completed at the end of December of 2020. And really the main goals are just that it's around 3, and that's that all homes, schools, and businesses have access to reliable and affordable broadband, that California residents have access to affordable service and devices, and that they have avenues to receive the training and the skills they need to succeed in the online world. In July of last year, our office and the department's roles were significantly expanded when Senate Bill 156 put CDT and the Broadband Office in charge of developing the state's Middle-Mile Broadband Initiative, and you'll hear from Deputy Director Mark Monroe and more about that after this presentation. Next slide, please. So on the action plan, the Department of Technology in our office oversees the implementation of the action plan and supports and monitors the progress of the partners who are assigned to many of these action items. We're leading efforts on 6 of those 24 action items. You'll see this slide really represents that we are working to explore options to enhance permitting processes at all levels of government, working with the Department of General Services to identify state property for possible use of broadband infrastructure deployment, working to promote state contractual vehicles to support cost savings and efficient purchasing of broadband services and equipment, working to promote and track the progress of adoption of affordable internet services and devices throughout the state, developing a multi-layered network of digital inclusion stakeholders, which really these roundtables are intended to be a part of that effort, and then establishing a Broadband for All portal to serve as a central repository of information. for a variety of partners, including you folks throughout the state. Next slide, please. I think critical to this group, and you've heard the work that Caltrans is doing on permitting, and a lot of that is related to their action items, which are action item number 4 and number 5 in the Broadband Action Plan. Action item number 6 is around enhancing permitting at all levels of government. In our annual review of the Broadband for All Action Plan, we had revised this to include not just CDT and the Broadband Office, but Caltrans, GoBiz, and the California Emerging Technology Fund. And just wanted to give you a brief update on the work we've been doing on this. At the federal level, we've had several conversations with our federal permitting partners, primarily through the Federal Permit Improvement Steering Council. And the attempt there is that given the amount of broadband infrastructure deployment there's going to be on the middle and the last mile, finding ways to establish a partnership with these entities to create a more efficient federal permitting process for the state. And the middle mile effort has really provided us with a use case to begin these conversations with the FPISC is their acronym. At the state level, we've been working very closely with Caltrans and the resource agency partners, again, using the middle mile as a use case to see how, given the size and scale of the project and the tight timelines, how we can develop programmatic approaches to permitting for broadband projects. And one of the goals here is that while the middle mile is a good use case to begin these conversations and develop solutions, we're keeping an eye towards how we can take what we learn and apply those to last mile efforts. The last two things I wanted to mention is on local government permitting. We're working very closely with GoBiz to really take the pulse of both on the local jurisdiction side and then hopefully with you all here today to get a sense of what the barriers and constraints are around local and last mile permitting. And at our local jurisdiction meeting a couple weeks ago, we sent out a survey to get their feedback on how the state might be able to support those efforts. And after this meeting today, we'll be sending out a survey to you all, and we hope you would participate and provide some feedback from your perspective on how we can collectively work to enhance permitting processes. Our ultimate goal is to develop a permitting checklist that would then turn into a permitting playbook that local governments and other entities could use to help navigate the broadband permitting system and hopefully deploy last mile projects faster. And then the last piece on this is we are working towards working with the state's tribal governments to really quickly share the state's plans in the middle and the last mile and engage with them about how we can early on make them aware of the projects that are going through and how they'll impact their lands. And Caltrans have provided some criteria to DGS to search through the state's SPI database and identify state properties that could be used for broadband deployment. And Jason, if you get on, feel free to jump in. But oh, there you go, Jason.
Oh, good. Yay! Sorry. Ironic technical difficulties. What I'm going to say, sorry, thank you, Scott. What I'm going to say is going to apply to non-Caltrans properties. So consider this maybe the balance of the state. But yes, there are 44,370 pieces of state property. A lot of that, as you can imagine, is forested land, lakes, beaches, those sorts of things that wouldn't necessarily have any direct linkage to this particular effort potentially, or maybe not. But we have quite a bit of property in state books. The beautiful thing about it is DGS, as the property manager for the state of California, while we don't have direct control over those properties, we can't dictate what happens to them. We have pretty broad transactional authority to work with departments in order to effectuate things on state property. And so we have been working with CPUC, with CDT, others to see where our state properties might align with the efforts, and just looking at a certain distance away from the Middle-Mile network, there are thousands of opportunities, both real property and structures. Of those 44,000 state-owned properties, there's about 24,000 structures across those, and so there's opportunities potentially for below ground deployment, the siting of towers, antennas on building roofs, those sorts of things. So it's an exciting prospect. We do publicly post our portfolio of state property. That's called the State Property Inventory. Happy to send out a link through whoever after this if folks are interested. But our ability to really identify property is pretty great. It is a GIS-enabled database. We stand ready, I think, to work with industry partners and seeing where we can really make progress. We have been talking about and developing a bit of a survey that we would expect to get out to industry partners shortly to be able to sort of help gauge interest. Because as you can imagine, with the universe as broad as our properties are, the more information, more feedback we get, the more we can refine that. Generally speaking, we would need to offer competitively any use of state property, which is why we'd want to sort of get more intel and be able to bundle things together. But the opportunity is there. It's an exciting prospect, and the nice thing about these non-Caltrans properties as well is, generally speaking, DGS would be the entity that would handle permitting, inspections, entitlement through CEQA, and of course state sovereignty attaches, and so we aren't subject to local regulation or control either. So it's kind of a one-stop shop, and it's an exciting prospect to work with the industry to see if we can site some of this broadband infrastructure on state property to advance both middle mile and last mile purposes.
Thank you so much, Jason. Really appreciate the work that you are leading on this effort in collaboration with the other partners. And we'll note Jason referenced the survey to solicit industry feedback on how this effort might be meaningful. We're combining a permitting and properties survey that we will send out pretty shortly after this event, and would just encourage you folks to take some time. It's a relatively short survey, just to get it into the hands of the right folks within your entities, and your feedback would be really critical to us, both making the efforts around permitting and property identification meaningful and actually complete and consistent with the Broadband for All Action Plan. Next slide, please. The last thing we wanted to update you folks on in terms of the work we're doing on the Broadband for All Action Plan is we have established the Broadband for All portal, a first attempt that was launched a couple months ago, and Laura Sasaki, our Broadband Initiatives Manager, is going to give you a brief demo on that. Laura?
Thanks, Scott. Good morning, everyone. Yolanda, if I could share, please.
A minute, sorry about that.
No problem.
There you go.
Thank you. Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Wanted to do just a brief walkthrough on the Broadband for All portal. As Scott mentioned, this was a result of action item 21 from the Broadband for All action plan. And it really highlights from the first moment that you hit the landing page, the Broadband for All program that is the overarching program over the broadband initiatives, the Broadband for All action plan, the Middle-Mile Broadband Initiative, and the Last Mile and Adoption programs from the Cpuc. These all link out to landing pages with the Middle Mile linking out to our CDT's Middle-Mile Broadband page, and the Last Mile and Adoption linking out to the Cpuc's pages. We have several tools on the main page for communities, for partners, as well as upcoming events, and an ability to subscribe to the mailing list if you want more updates on Broadband for All. So we have a section here where we are tracking some of the progress on the initiatives. I'm just going to highlight the action plan progress tracker. Because that does include some of the items that we've already talked about here today, which is around permitting, state properties, and efforts that are in support of the Middle Mile Initiative and the Last Mile Initiative as well. So you'll see what the status is and what the progress is. If you're just dying for more information on that, you can always click on that and to expand it, and they'll give you more information on what the actual requirements of the action plan are. So one of the areas that we're really excited about here is for partners, and this is an area that is for all Broadband for All partners, ISPs most certainly included in that. Currently, we have an area that is for broadband planning. What you'll see is that this is, again, as Scott said, kind of our initial version of the portal. It will continue to iterate, grow, expand with help from our partners. And currently we've got some toolkits and resources on here, broadband implementation and plans, sample plans, and these may be of interest. These are plans from communities, cities and counties, regional consortia, and we will continue to expand those as well. We have digital inclusion tools, digital skills training tools. And again, this is something that we want to build out with help from our partners. So if you happen to have a program within your company that helps folks with digital literacy, that's something that we would love to hear about, and we would love to be able to link and share. As we're looking at some of the other things for partners, we're going to look at funding. We have a funding database. We are in the process of getting this updated, and this will be updated on a regular basis, but it enables you to kind of search by the availability of funding depending on what it is that you're looking for, provides more information on that, and then you're able to actually go out and look at what the application process is like. The Affordable Service Programs. This is a tool that we partnered with everyone on in the California Emerging Technology Fund to provide for our partners. I'm going to give an example of a zip code here. You type your zip code in. This is my hometown in the rural Central Valley. So I'm going to click on Kingsburg, right off of 99, find some offers. And so I'm going to go through, I'm just going to select some of these options here. And as we're doing this, it's starting to bring up affordable offers in our area. Now, we are highlighting the Affordable Connectivity Program as the very first offer that's there, because we know that that applies across the entire state. It's not zip code specific. And in many cases, when partnered with a lot of the low-cost and affordable offers that you are providing for consumers and residents, it can zero out a home or household's monthly cost. So I wanted to highlight that, and it's just showing us what's available in that particular zip code, including device offers. So thank you all for participating in the ACP. If you are not seeing your name on there, and you know that you're providing in that area code, just let us know. We can kind of work on that, getting that up there so that it's reflected accurately. We also have an area that is about kind of the history of Broadband for All. This is something that you can kind of take a look through. Scott touched on this on some of the opening slides. And then certainly if you need to get a hold of us, please come over here, use the contact us. We do check this. We will follow up if you have any questions, if there's something that you're looking for on the portal and you're not seeing, let us know. And then we'll follow up with you. So, Scott, I'm going to hand that back over to you, and thank you all.
Got it. Thank you, Laura. And just want to say really congratulations to, and a good job to you and the team and the various, staff at the other state agencies who helped put this together. I think we intend for it to be a useful tool and not to supplant or replace, other efforts that are out there, but to really serve as a central location where folks can find information about, the broadband work going on in California. And do want to just reiterate what Laura said, that the broadband portal is we intend to iterate this and really want to underscore that we would love to have your feedback on how we could make the portal more useful as a way to communicate and share information about what ISPs and your organizations are doing to promote broadband deployment and adoption throughout the state. So thank you. And that concludes the update on the Broadband for All Action Plan. And want to turn it over to my colleague, Mark Monroe.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Thanks for participating. As I'm the Deputy Director for the Middle-Mile Broadband Initiative. Happy to kind of talk through where we are with the project so far and kind of how we got here. We want to move on to the next slide. So I think everybody would be familiar with SB 156. It was passed and signed last July 2021. It provided $6 billion over 3 years to really close the digital divide, to expand broadband infrastructure, increase affordability, and enhance access. That included $2.75 billion for last mile infrastructure grant programs and supporting programs like the Public Utilities Commission. And that included $3.25 billion for the California Department of Technology to develop an open access middle mile network throughout the state, largely built along Caltrans right of way and using really the state's existing right of way. Next slide. All right, SB 156 articulated roles for several different entities. I put obviously CDT kind of in charge of the overall Middle-Mile Broadband Initiative. It specified the Public Utilities Commission, identified the unserved and underserved locations throughout the state. It specified a role for a third-party administrator to kind of manage the development of the overall network. We have an agreement with Golden State Net, who has experience operating a network, and they're providing that lens in terms of building something out that can be operated and provide reliable middle mile service. As mentioned, the large role here is going to be for Caltrans, who has experience building projects and has some experience actually building middle mile projects. And they'll be doing the majority of the construction along the state highway system. And then, of course, Department of Finance is there to make sure that that we're following the kind of the budgets, the budget implementation rules, and that the funding's is being used in the right way. And as we'll get to here, the funds appropriated for this in this project are federal funds, state and local fiscal recovery funds, and the Department of Finance is heading up the reporting on to the U.S. Treasury on the use of those funds. Next slide. When we established the Middle Mile Advisory Committee, we set up 3 guiding principles. One, to obviously provide affordable open access, middle-mile broadband infrastructure to enable the last mile network connectivity throughout the state. Obviously, middle mile isn't what in and of itself provides the connectivity, but it's really getting a middle mile alternative to last mile providers so that they can actually provide that link up to homes and businesses and communities. Number 2, building the network expeditiously, leveraging existing infrastructure. There is existing infrastructure in the ground, and so the idea is that given the funding available, to the extent that it's insufficient to build out the entire network, then we would look at the use of existing infrastructure to fill in the gaps. And then the third is to prioritize connectivity to unserved and underserved communities, including community institutions. And so this is where the Public Utilities Commission assessment and the public process that the PUC did last fall really comes into play in terms of helping us target where the network needs to be. Next slide. Now this is this kind of infographic here kind of explains kind of the stages of the project that will kind of roll out here. We have, as I mentioned, the Public Utilities Commission had really focused on providing their initial input and gathering public input last fall. They produced a map with that input on it last December. And similarly, CDT has been working with Golden State Net and Caltrans on the engineering and design and continues that work right now. And then as we roll out with identifying locations, Caltrans can begin its pre-construction process. And Caltrans pre-construction process is, with all the permitting and design and environmental work that needs to be done, that's really, as I said before, that takes a lot of time. And so we're trying to, that needs to be completed within 2 years so that we can spend the funds and get the project moving within the time frame required by the federal guidelines. Next slide. And this slide here really just kind of shows the fact that we have the $3.25 billion that was made available in 2021 is really going to be spent in the out years. Right now, we're as we design and develop the program, we have relatively low expenditures, but as we move to having Caltrans engineers do the pre-construction and the planning of the system, and then we move out to construction, that's where you're going to see a real ramp up of expenditures as we move from 2023 out to the completing in 2026. Next slide. So as I mentioned before, the $3.25 billion that was appropriated in the budget package in 2021. It's federal funds. These federal guidelines require that the ARPA funds must be encumbered, meaning they're under contract by December of 2024, and they must be liquidated and spent with the project completed by December of 2026. And so given the initial estimates of what the project will cost per mile, I think we had the initial estimates were that we would be able to build 6,000 miles. The SB 156 largely expects the state to build as much as possible, but with the understanding that to the extent the funding isn't sufficient, the gap, as I mentioned before, can be we can use IOU leases to close the gap to really round out what it was originally estimated to be a network in the range of 8,000 miles. Next slide. And with that, I'll kind of turn it over to Eric Hunsinger, Golden State Net.
Thanks, Mark. And thank you, Scott Adams, Deputy Director Scott Adams, and Secretary Tom. Appreciate the time here to provide an update. Next slide, please. So we're collaborating with CDT and the CPUC and Caltrans. We have a general goal here, as Mr. Monroe had noted, of developing in-ground infrastructure across the state. And while we need to prioritize unserved and underserved areas, as well as areas of extreme socioeconomic requirements, like Los Angeles and Oakland. There's network across the state that we can collaborate with, but the state has a top priority of constructing first. And there's reasons around that, and I'll describe those shortly. We've divided the state into 5 regions. You'll see that in a moment. And so then we'll kind of review the optimization process that we'll be going through. Next slide, please. Just the title slide, please continue. There you go. Thank you. So as I mentioned earlier, there's numerous factors in consideration for the network, including environmental hazards, fire, and geography, and mountainous areas, areas through the Central Valley, farming areas, and then urban areas. It's a really diverse set of factors to consider in the construction. We started with the CPUC's recommended middle mile map, which identified areas of need according to households. And then we applied a topological approach of using rings, telecom rings, in order to create redundancy and resiliency. The goal is to get within 50 miles or less of unserved populations, with the idea that developing a flexible network would allow the last mile CASIF initiatives to expand on the footprint and get homes connected to the internet or to the larger telecom world. Next slide, please. So the top priority is working with Caltrans. Caltrans runs a sizable organization that is well-versed in project management and procurement. And so through their auspices and their vast real estate rights-of-way, it's a natural opportunity to develop a statewide middle-mile network. So as we analyze the routes and the funding available, we'll work through how we might build the entire network, but then there may be opportunities to collaborate with commercial entities to reduce the time to market and construction costs. So we're going to aim for some early wins to meet some expectations of the residents and policymakers. We'll utilize the best practices that telecom industry has in place, cutting-edge technology of conduit, boring and trenching, and putting in a large fiber count to meet the demand, the expected demand of constituents. Next slide, please. So as we go through, we have some initial routes that we've proposed. We need to optimize the design potential. We're going through an analysis with Mr. Mark Monroe and Mr. Scott Adams to evaluate where it makes sense to build versus buy. And we're also looking at joint build opportunities with carriers who have plans throughout the state to construct their own network and to collaborate to reduce the overall costs of construction. So in the optimization process, we'll be working to maximize the number of miles in the newly constructed network and minimize the costs wherever possible. There are some top priorities that the CPU has set, 9 counties specifically where there's a desperate need for broadband because network just hasn't been feasible commercially to install. So we'll be focusing on areas that commercial carriers have not been able to justify construction. In addition to that, we want to make sure that there's flexible network design so that the overall network has a future-proof approach to interconnecting and collaborating with constituents. Next slide, please. As Mr. Monroe mentioned before, we've divided the overall state into some general regions, and the Caltrans districts here are denoted in those regions. Next slide. So Region 1, this isn't in any particular order, it's just from north to south is how we're reviewing this. But Region 1 is a vastly underserved area, and it's prone to fire and also avalanches and heavy snows. So there's quite an environmental impact on networks currently in this area. And so undergrounding the network is a top priority. In addition to the opportunity to develop the network, we have been working with two of the largest tribal nations within the state of California, and that would be the Cpuc and the Yurok tribal nations. Both have indicated that they were willing to collaborate with the state in some fashion, and so we're working through the details of what that might be like. It's interesting because in addition to that, Cpuc Telecom has indicated their willingness to collaborate with the state in constructing network underground. And the important piece here is that there's multiple entities coming together to solve the regional connection. So Cpuc Tel has their piece of construction that they're looking to do. The state can collaborate with them, and then the Cpuc would be integral into tying that regionally throughout the network. Next slide, please. Here you can get a look at the region and how Caltrans districts break out across the Region 1 that we've defined. Next slide. And the CPUC's analysis. Here you'll see concentrated areas. This isn't geographically focused, the underserved areas, but it's a concentrated area showing desperate need in the particular area, as well as the aforementioned tribal entities. Next slide. Originally, in the early days of collaboration with CDT, we had defined some projects that we believed could be a top priority, and as well as an opportunity to work through various project solution types. But we quickly moved into the next phase of development of the network. Next slide. And here you see the proposed ring topology throughout the state. We're still evaluating costs and routes appropriateness. And then we'll also be, as Mr. Monroe had noted, evaluating IRU potentials in certain areas and joint builds in certain areas. We're not precisely certain where those are because they have to be, they're covered under NDA, but we'll be working with carriers in strategic situations if it makes sense for the state. Next slide. And here is just a bit more detail with the CPUC priorities overlaid on the recommended routes. And I believe we'll move to Region 2 after this. Next slide. So again, in Region 2, moving south, sparsely populated mountainous regions, again, fire risks, affordability and socioeconomic factors do weigh into the next region because California is a large state with a diverse set of requirements. There are some joint build opportunities here, and we would need to analyze partnership with them on some of these routes. Next slide. So here's how the Caltrans districts lay out. You can see the Bay Area is included in this region. Next slide. Of note here is that the eastern Sierra is sparsely populated, but strongly prioritized by the CPUC in their analysis. And also the Central Valley, right there through the Central Valley, you see top priority of households unserved and the need to develop infrastructure that's affordable for that area. And surprisingly, one of the most technologically advanced areas in the world, the Bay Area, a strong need for affordable options to connect the constituents of California. Next slide. And here again, the original 18 recommended routes, which is a combination of leveraging existing backbone offered to the state via the CalREM network or an IRU on those routes, as well as proposed construction. And then as we've moved through the process of analyzing where we would want to construct everywhere, the next slide will show some interconnectedness. Please, next slide. Thank you. So here in a bit more detail, tighter rings, broader topology of construction to meet the demands and put in the fiber count that would be more meaningful to the constituents of California. And the next slide, please. The next slide will show how the CPUC has prioritized these areas. Thank you. Next slide. Region 3, as we move further south, includes, again, sparsely populated mountainous regions and high-risk fire zones, areas, again, that commercial entities haven't found productive to their business plans, so the state has taken it upon itself to prioritize construction. And included in this area is another large tribal entity, the Tule River Tribal Nation. And then there's some opportunities for joint builds here as well. Next slide. Can we move to the next slide, please? Thank you. So here, I think we skipped the Caltrans regions, which is just fine. That's fine. Thank you. Go ahead. Next slide. Thank you. So the populations, areas in need, you can see the concentration comes through the Central Valley, sparsely populated along 395 there. I want to point out that we are collaborating with Digital 395 and Inyo Networks to evaluate how we might work on their network. So they've opened up their routes for consideration by the state. In addition, there's on the coastal region in San Luis Obispo, large areas of desperate need for broadband. Next slide, please. You can see here again the original 18 proposed, which is a mixture of construction and existing network. Next slide. And as we analyze the Caltrans right-of-way, so proposed routes for potential build, as I've noted, we are evaluating carriers in this region. Next slide. And here's the CPUC recommended. I want to point out that some of the areas that the CPUC recommended are very close together. So the recommendation by the TPA is to build a somewhat larger ring of 50 miles. The idea is not to skip over these areas, but to get the middle mile in place most effectively, and then as CASA grants are made for last mile initiatives, or if communities can find other sources of funding, the flexibility of interconnecting is possible. And I didn't mention that earlier, so let me describe that topology very briefly here. If Caltrans is able to construct this network, and we choose construction over buying, then we'll have the ability to interconnect about every 2,500 feet. We are making it accessible that way because of the philosophy of putting a ring cut anywhere in the network that would be available for last mile interconnection. Next slide. So Region 4, again, a densely urban area, also very sparsely populated rural area, surprisingly. You'll see that here in a moment. In addition to that, we are evaluating broadband needs in Catalina Island. And then we're looking primarily at socioeconomic factors and in areas where commercial entities have not been able to justify construction. Next slide. So surprisingly, most people, when they think of Los Angeles, their first thought is the city, but there are rural areas in need in this area. So here are the Caltrans Districts. The next slide, please. And the population in need. While there's numerous carriers in the area, there are a number of socioeconomic factors that are preventing broadband from reaching the constituents in this area. Next slide. So here's the original analysis of existing network and then CPUC proposed routes. Next slide. Then interconnecting the routes and leveraging Caltrans right-of-way to build a much more robust middle mile connectivity. It would pick up many parts of the region that are in need, and there is a potential that we might find ways to interconnect Catalina Island through commercial relationships. Next slide. And here's the the CPUC recommended routes. And I think we're moving to the last region, Region 5. Next slide, please. Thank you. Here again, diverse set of requirements, mountainous areas, subject to extreme heat and fire, as well as urban areas in need of some sort of broadband relief. A significant number of tribal nations, and I apologize to any tribal entities that might be listening in, too numerous to name here. So we're looking for service affordability in these locations. Next slide, please. So San Bernardino County and Imperial County, as well as San Diego County, very large areas, very diverse set of problems to solve. Next slide. So here we have, again, a look at the population. The CDT and the CPUC have both indicated it isn't the size of the population that we're tackling, so this is turning somewhat the idea of commercial networks upside down, but it is every region that is unserved or underserved. Next slide. There was the original proposal of projects. It was never intended to be a complete network until we went through further analysis. So next slide. And here we have more coverage. There's some interesting opportunities here because one area of collaboration was with the Coachella Valley Association of Governments. They came to us initially early in the process to collaborate and do a joint build with them. They've, I believe, released their RFP for construction, which would include collaborating with the state of California and creating a network there around the Coachella Valley. And the proposal is to interconnect this past the Salton Sea and down towards the border. And then on the eastern portion, numerous tribal entities would benefit from strengthening the broadband capabilities in their regions. And I want to also point out that major portions of this in the northern portion of this region, underserved areas, but there's a strong opportunity to develop commercial partnerships with perhaps mobile carriers that are interested in this region as well. Next slide. And there's the CPUC overlay. Next slide. And that's a snapshot of where we are today. This is not a final map. We're still working through the evaluation of these routes with the CDT and CPUC. And so as we optimize the routes for construction and budget, as well as IRUs, many of these things will change. Thanks for your time. And I'll hand it back to Mr. Monroe. Thank you.
All right, very good. We really appreciate that presentation, Golden State Sense partnership on this project. A lot of good information here. Next slide. I think what we'll kind of want to highlight going forward here is, as Mr. Hunsinger noted, we are. This is not the final map. We basically, the assignment kind of from CDT's perspective, kind of the approach we want to take is taking the Public Utilities Commission's initial map and the input provided, and then overlaying that with a look at if we were to build the entire network, where would it need to build, right? And we may not have funding, as I indicated earlier, to build the entire network, but if we were, what that is going to allow us to do is get Caltrans to start what we've initially identified as 18 to 24 months of pre-construction work that would need to be done before we could start construction. And doing the math on that, that puts us into the at least halfway through 2024, with all the contracts needing to be signed by the end of 2024. So we're hoping to see some earlier progress on some of these, but the idea again is to take this map, and then CDT's in the process of kind of doing an assessment to see what, based on comparing this map to the Public Utilities Commission's map, and see if there is a broad universe of what we might need Caltrans to actually design and get them started, get their clock started in terms of doing their pre-construction work. And then while we have them doing that, as Mr. Hunsinger noted, we will continue to look at where lease alternatives are available and where they might exist. As Caltrans goes through its pre-construction process, a component of that will be refining the cost estimates for the network, which is then going to inform us about how much we can afford to build, and kind of how much we'll need to, how many miles of leasing of existing infrastructure we will need. And then a third point is we have Golden State Net is working with some other partners, the Broadband Equity Partnership and CDT to do a market sounding. So to the extent that we have to make some, we're going to be making some choices regarding where we build versus where we lease. I think generally speaking, we assume that building will, when we build, we're going to be installing 288 count fiber as kind of the base. And so that's enough fiber to potentially be doing, some level of dark fiber IRUs. We're going to make sure that as we look at, as we look at where we build versus where we lease, we can take into account what the need is going to be for dark fiber IRUs. Obviously, not everybody is interested in them, and not every region could benefit from them. So that's just another layer that we want to put on top of our assessment. So that's kind of our plan going forward here, taking what GSN and PUC have given us and getting Caltrans started, and then doing some of these other processes simultaneously to better clarify where it's going to make the most sense to build versus where it's going to make the most sense where necessary to lease. So I think we can kind of go to the next slide. Turn back to you, Scott.
Thanks, Mark. Thank you, Eric. Next up on the agenda is Robert Osborne from the Public Utilities Commission is going to provide an update on the last mile programs that PUC is administering. Rob?
Thank you, Scott. Good morning, and thank you for allowing me to provide an update on the CPUC's last mile broadband funding activities. I'm Robert Osborne, Director of the Communications Division at the California Public Utilities Commission. There's a lot of information here, so if we run out of time to answer your questions, I'll be happy to follow up afterwards. The broadband legislation passed last year demonstrated the state's serious commitment to closing the digital divide by leveraging federal recovery funds to construct a statewide open access middle-mile network that was just gone through, and to fund last-mile broadband networks. The CPC responded quickly to begin implementing this historic legislation by scoping the various funding programs assigned to the CPC into two critical rulemakings. One is the California Advanced Services Fund rulemaking, and the other one is the Broadband for All rulemaking. So next slide, please. So the broadband investments, the slide provides an overview of the various broadband initiatives in which the CPC is involved pursuant to last year's legislative package. So to begin, I'm going to summarize the group of last mile initiatives, and then I'll drill down into some of the more relevant programs in later slides. So first, you have the broadband technical assistance, sometimes referred to as local agency technical assistance. And this is $50 million allocated. And the purpose is to help prepare local governments and tribes for broadband infrastructure investments. The second is the loan loss reserve account. And this account is created to enable outside financing for local governments and nonprofits to deploy broadband networks. It has $750 million allocated to it over 3 years. Third is the federal funding account, sometimes called the last mile account, which has $2 billion allocated over 3 years. And then finally, the last one, California Advanced Services Fund, which includes a number of sub-accounts or separate programs that address broadband needs in a variety of areas, including adoption, which helps people who have infrastructure to get broadband, connectivity in public housing and other low-income communities, funding for regional planning and expert consortia, and a legacy infrastructure grant program with some statutory differences from the federal funding account. And the box on the right summarizes the CPC's contribution to the $3.25 billion Middle-Mile Initiative led by the Department of Technology, which Mark and Eric just provided an update for. Next slide, please. So one of the challenges facing not just California, but the nation as a whole is how to incentivize broadband deployment in areas where private industry has been unable to justify the investment due to insufficient revenue or high capital and operational expenses. During the 1930s, we solved this problem of electricity for all with the Rural Electrification Act. We followed that with providing telephone service through the federal and state high-cost programs. The circumstances today are different. Broadband is deployed in many areas, but we still have some communities without access or sufficient access. And because of this, broadband policymakers are pursuing new deployment models. So the key point here is that there's no one-size-fits-all solution. So we've put a number of different models up here on this table. So the table categorizes various levels of public entity involvement along the value chain in broadband networks in ways that may be helpful for grounding discussions about last mile programs. This table is from a white paper published by the nonprofit US Ignite. The table goes from fully public models in row 1, the full municipal broadband, to fully private down at the bottom in row 5. The columns divide the type of work that can be assumed by either a public or private entity over the course of the full network development. So you see the blue shading are cells where a public entity does the work, and the gray shaded cells denote private entity activities. I want to highlight 2 points about this table. First, I want to note that for the bottom row, the full private provider, the public entity still manages the rights of way and utility infrastructure, as we do in California. This is stating the obvious, but public entities do have a role in broadband, no matter how it's deployed. Second, the rightmost column lists the example cities that have deployed broadband, and you'll see in row 4, Fullerton is a California example of where a company called Sci-Fi Networks built a privately funded service-based competition network. This is one where a private entity owns the infrastructure and sells infrastructure access to two or more internet service providers who compete for customers. So this is referred to in the chart as the private developer open access. Recently, the CPC hosted a workshop for the California Advanced Services Fund, and we had a panel discussion on municipal broadband. And I'll be happy to provide a link to that video so you can see the discussion on that. We had some interesting viewpoints and input on that. So now I will move on to describing some of our specific last mile programs. But as we're going along, please keep in mind one or more programs I'll describe can support your jurisdiction's work wherever you're operating, listed in the chart. And so keep thinking back to this public-private broadband model slide. Next slide, please. So the broadband package tasked the CPC with awarding $50 million in technical assistance grants to public entities and nonprofits to help them prepare to provide service in their communities. A local agency is broadly defined in the program rules. It may be a city, a county, including a county service area. It may be a community services district, a public utility district, municipal utility district, joint powers authority, a local educational agency, a sovereign tribal government, an electric cooperative. So I'll refer you to the rules if you want to learn more about that. Individual grants are to be no more than $1 million per applicant, and there's an expedited process for requests of $500,000 or less. The funds can cover a range of pre-project costs to deploy last-mile broadband infrastructure, including environmental permitting, needs assessments, and strategic plans. On the next steps for you to be aware of, the CPC will hold webinars and post videos to present the project application process with eligible entities. And these are targeted for late May and early June, with application windows opening in June or July. Think about what work your jurisdiction, wherever you're operating, to the extent that you will be working with local agencies, how they can prepare for these programs, and how much of this can be supported by a technical assistance grant. Next slide. So the Loan Loss Reserve Fund, the broadband package committed $750 million over 3 years for the Loan Loss Reserve Fund. The purpose of this fund is to assist local governments and nonprofit entities in securing financing so that they may build out their own last-mile broadband infrastructure. The Loan Loss Reserve will provide collateral to local governments to enable better borrowing rates and terms for bonds issued to deploy broadband. Look for a CPC straw proposal to be issued before August and workshops to collaborate on the practicalities and details of implementation. There will be an opportunity to provide comment on this straw proposal. If you plan to apply for a Loan Loss Reserve Fund grant, please engage with the CPC and consider becoming a party to the proceedings so that you can share your expertise to help inform the rules and implementation of the program. Next slide, please. So the federal funding account, this is the last mile program, and the CPC adopted program rules earlier, actually in April, so April 21st at the voting meeting, and the rules included an allocation by county of funds out of the $2 billion tranche for last mile projects. The CPC targets accepting applications by July this year to look for data for interested applicants on priority or presumed eligible areas in the coming weeks. The data will be published on the Commission's website as well as distributed to the service list for the two proceedings I've referred to earlier. And as this last bullet notes, it's a good time to begin planning for these applications. Public entities can evaluate activities for a technical assistance grant to support federal funding account broadband work. But I want to emphasize that the local agency technical assistance grant is not a prerequisite for this, so you don't need to have that grant before you can apply for the federal funding account. Next slide, please. So for over the past decade, the California Advanced Services Fund broadband grant program has supported a range of broadband investment. The program was updated and reinvigorated by a number of pieces of legislation last year. A proposed decision is up for the CPC to consider actually next week, May 19th, that modernizes the program rules for a number of the long-standing programs. So, for example, the adoption account, which as of last December had awarded 212 grants for adoption projects, 179 for grants for digital literacy. Public housing or low-income communities account, 128 public housing grants were awarded as of December last year, and that was for adoption. And then 322 public housing infrastructure grants were awarded. And also the consortia account, which funds the regional broadband experts that are currently in place today. A proposal on the infrastructure grant program is expected before the end of second quarter 2022. So actions you might consider include joining the distribution list or the service list for the CSS, California Advanced Services Fund activities, which is how grant timing and applications will be announced, and potentially engaging with the Commission to inform the implementation of these programs, such as becoming a party to the CPUC rulemaking. And that rulemaking, just for reference, is rulemaking 20-08-021. Once again, rulemaking 20-08-021. Next slide, please. The Public Housing Account Grant Program provides funding for the cost of inside wiring or connectivity within a public housing development. Among other changes, the proposed decision would update the delivered speed requirements and would increase the amount of funding that may be awarded to a project under ministerial review. The proposed decision would also make farm worker housing developments eligible for the program. There were also changes that will make it easier for city charter public housing developments to qualify. With regard to timing, as it shows on the slide, we're targeting applications for June or July this year. And action assess broadband needs of publicly supported housing communities and prepare applications. So to the extent that this is applicable to this audience, this is an important point to make. And the next slide, please. So this is the last slide of my presentation. Is just really a public service announcement as part of our outreach effort. The CPC is conducting a survey to assess community broadband assets, broadband needs, and interests in state grant programs. This is something we have up on SurveyMonkey. The survey responses will inform the program development and outreach. And so I'm encouraging everyone to participate in the broadband survey for local governments by May 30th. And the link is here at the bottom of the slide. And this concludes my remarks. So thank you. Back to you, Scott.
Thanks so much, Rob, and for all the great work that PUC is doing and providing such detailed information. I'd like to introduce our next speaker and panelist, and that's Sunny McPeak and Susan Walters from the California Emerging Technology Fund.
Thank you, Scott. I think it is really worth noting that you at the California Department of Technology and the California Public Utilities Commission, and now with this Caltrans ISP semi-annual meeting, we're talking about both deployment and adoption. The goal is to get people online connected so it makes their lives easier and they can save money. And we can also reduce impacts on the environment. And so this is a really important discussion in the context of working with all of you, the internet service providers, many of whom have, I know, shared with us that you're thinking about if you're going to deploy into a given area that is a high need, unserved, that you want to couple your efforts on deployment with your work on adoption. And so we're going to talk today about how we can work together on getting everyone connected. We are going to focus on, as you heard Laura Sasaki talk earlier, on the Affordable Connectivity Program so that we get the federal government dollars flowing into California. We also want to note that most of the ISPs also have their own affordable offers, which we continue to make residents aware of. We have a panel that Susan Walters is going to lead Susan Walters is our Senior Vice President. Over the last 15 years, Susan has been responsible for working with a network of over 100 community-based organizations and public agencies that have trained more than 1 million people in digital literacy in California and have gotten signed up more than 500,000 households, documented adoptions, connecting people to the internet. And so this conversation is really about how we all can think in terms of, as we deploy, what we also need to be doing to engage all the stakeholders around adoption. With that, let me turn this over to our Senior Vice President, Susan Walters.
Good morning, everyone. If we could have the next slide. Everybody taking their time with this. We have lots of great information this morning, and it is really a testament to the level of collaboration that is going on and that will be needed continually as we go through the process. Let's go on to the next slide. I think many people on the call know the Affordable Connectivity Program, or as we describe it, ACP. But for those who are less familiar with the details, briefly, it's $30 a month unless someone is on tribal lands. You can see then it's $75 a month. The eligibility ranges widely. It is consistent with Lifeline in California and those requirements. One precedent-setting program rule with ACP is that a customer that is currently on Lifeline, meaning they've been approved for the Lifeline program, they do not need to complete an application. They are automatically qualified for ACP and can contact an internet service provider and let them know they're a participant in Lifeline and want to, subscribe to another internet service. We are engaged, as Sunny said, with lots of organizations around the state to help get the word out as we have been about different affordable offers. We know cost is the number one barrier to why people aren't online and why people go online and offline. So we are fortunate to have this ACP benefit to work with and to really seek other partnerships. And so part of the partnerships we're seeking are the qualifying agencies that run the programs you see listed here under eligibility. And so there's a lot of opportunity to work with the agencies in these programs in county and generally local government and anchor institutions. Let's go on to the next slide. You'll see here for the state of California, the Broadband Council has set a goal of enrolling 5 million households. You see the different time frames and percentages. So, in fact, there are 6 million households that are eligible in California, but our goal will be 5 million. The Broadband Council has supported a number of different strategies. You'll see them listed here under Plan of Action. Part of that is what we are doing today, of course, in terms of talking with the roundtables and getting the word out about what ACP can do and who can help us get the word out about it and how to engage. So a lot of what we look at is raising awareness, but also getting state and local agencies to promote because they are a creditable source, and to distribute information and then engage our trusted messengers, which generally we refer to are the CBOs, but there are lots of folks who can get out, messages. We also have we begin the process, of course, with our raising awareness and have advertising going on in the marketplace, and are hopeful that ISPs can join that effort as well. Let me go on to the next slide. Thank you. A few things we know about ACP as the successor of the emergency broadband program. This number you see for enrollments includes both EBB and ACP. So 1.4 million households. That already exceeds the number of folks enrolled in Lifeline. And this, one thing that we are realizing is we need to better promote the value of home internet. 70% of the folks signing up for ACP are using it for mobile. And so that means when they leave the house, the rest of the folks in the house don't have internet, because under Lifeline, it's just one mobile phone per household. So we really have to help people understand there's an opportunity to do both mobile and home internet with the existence of ACP. And just, you'll see the numbers again in a little more detail on the bottom for the U.S. and California. And then off to the right, there's a screenshot of a map that Cal State Chico has put together, their GIS unit, with us. We're working with the California Department of Technology now to really put that in a usable form for the entire state. It will become part of the Broadband for All portal, and it will be a resource to everyone because it will let you know by zip code and by county the number of eligible households and then the number that have actually enrolled. And so that information will be updated with the reports that USAC, issues. And so we will keep it as current as the numbers we have from USAC. But looking forward to that, and again, hope it will be useful to many of you as well. Let's go on. The last slide. Today, we're going to hear about some of the activities that are going on to raise awareness. And so we'll hear from San Diego first and describe their effort as really organizing with all possible stakeholders. We call it all hands on deck. And then Siskiyou Telephone is here, Russ Elliott is here to talk about what they're doing. So let's go ahead, and Chris, I believe, is here and ready to go. You'll hear us talk about some themes and the importance of really using both paid and earned media and working with many different departments, and agencies with local government in the community. I think Chris's program really demonstrates this very well. So, Chris, you're up.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me, first of all. And if you put up my slides, that'll be a good start as well. For those of you who don't recognize my name, Sunny mentioned it earlier on the call. I am Chris Schmidt from Caltrans. In the region of all kinds of different services that are available. And it's really key that they are a trusted messenger within the community, that if you call, you're going to be speaking to a live human being that can really walk you through what you need to know. And notice it's a phone call. It is not an internet issue in terms of accessing this information. Most people do still have access to a phone call, and that's a great way to get hooked up with information. So they're tailoring their programs beyond just providing referrals, but we're making sure people are getting the kind of help that they really need, whether it's internet service, whether it's the information about public Wi-Fi, whether it's about getting a discounted or free computer, but also about education and training in terms of adoption and literacy. Those are all services that are available in the community. We just need to spread the word more, and 211 is just a fantastic way to get the word out about them. Next slide, please. So we're also developing an outreach strategy that really is the kind of ubiquitous outreach that we do for many things that we market in the public sector. On the right-hand side is something called the Youth Opportunity Pass, which we're currently rolling out in the region to provide free transit to everyone under age of 18. That's a huge thing in our region, to get young people to ride transit. And obviously it's a similar challenge. We need to market the opportunity. We need to make sure they understand what they need to do to sign up for the new Pronto Pass program. And so we're taking the lessons learned from developing outreach materials from that campaign and applying that to ACP, whether it's print distribution and getting things into people's hands, doing direct mailers that can really get right into the mailbox, working through community events, especially focusing on student-based events with the start of school, and direct advertising, whether it's bought or paid. We need to make sure that the word gets out and that the local media supports this rollout as well. So we're really trying to make a big splash like we typically try to do with all of our marketing campaigns. Next slide. So in terms of overall, all of the effort that is embedded here is also supporting the regional digital equity strategy and action plan that was adopted. So very similar to what Scott mentioned as the statewide action plan, we have a regional action plan as well. That is actually my job, is to see that that gets implemented. And we want you to join us and connect with us. There's lots going on. We've done a great deal already. ACP is one aspect, and I want to really highlight ACP is just one component, very important component, mind you, and it's an early win, but there's so much more to be done. And we really want you to connect with us. This plan is something that others can also borrow from and take a look at. Structurally, it's very sound. It was not developed, by some highfalutin, high-minded people, but it was really done with a group of stakeholders whose voices were heard and their issues were clearly represented in this plan. So welcome your feedback and reaching out, and feel free to call, email me anytime you wish. Like I said, I've got lots of perspective, lots to say on this topic. I'm very passionate about it as well, and really want you to join us in the effort. I know a number of the ISPs locally have already pledged their support of ACP. We hope that will be the case in the implementation of the overall strategy and action plan as well. So with that, back to you, Susan.
Great, thank you so much, Chris. And you're absolutely right. The goal really is about digital equity, and ACP is one piece of it. It's, if you will, an organizing piece. So we are going to go on and hear from Russ Elliott, who's CEO for Cpuc Telephone, and they also have a broad approach to broadband. Russ?
Hey, thank you, Susan. Good morning. Everybody can hear me. Give me a thumbs up. Awesome. Fantastic. It's good to be here. I, too, am enthusiastic about broadband and equity and inclusion, Chris. So I'm excited to be here today. And I want to thank Scott Adams and his team and Caltrans for the invite today to collaborate. And I also want to take a special moment to thank Eric Hunziker and the Golden State Net Group. They continue to say Cpuc Telephone and all the things that they do, but it has been truly a partnership and a collaboration, and private and public partnerships are going to be the key. As we heard from Mr. Osborne earlier, he showed a bunch of models in broadband, and, there is no silver bullet. It is going to be a shotgun type approach, and you have to look at the unique locations and what's going on. And I'm excited to share with you a very unique part of this state, and one that I'm relatively new to because I've only been here about 6 months, but Northern California, very Northern California, in Cpuc County, and especially Western Cpuc County, where Cpuc Telephone, sets up shop and serves in a carrier of last resort and obligated to serve the 4,400 folks of Western California. So I'll go ahead and take that first slide, kind of show you where we're at and what we do. There we are. That's us. We're up in that pink corner up there, way up there in Northern California. People talk about Northern California, say, oh yeah, San Francisco, Oakland. No, Northern California. I'm here. I'm Southern Oregon, Northern California. So anyway, it's a very unique area, and as you can see, we serve a pretty large territory of very diverse terrain and folks. So I'll share more about that in just a minute. Our area doesn't have the luxury of having a bunch of anchor tenants to offset our costs. There aren't a bunch of of big paying commercial provider for commercial opportunities up here. So, truly it is a rural area, an area of high cost. And we believe because people choose to live rurally, whether it's by choice or by ethnic background or by generational, participation, they don't need to be, they shouldn't be marginalized. And this is a one time in a lifetime opportunity that we're going to be able to set these folks up for success for future generations. So we're excited to be part of that conversation. So next slide, please. For those of you that don't know my background, I was recently the first broadband director for Washington State, where Governor Inslee brought me in to direct his broadband program up there. And prior to that, I was the director of the Wyoming State Broadband, stood up a broadband office for Governor Gordon there. So in doing that, I was very aware of digital equity and inclusion. We stood up a digital equity inclusion office there in Washington State as well. Knew that was going to be a critical component. But I also developed this model that I think is very much, appropriate for conversation today. We believed that, in my history as broadband, so I used to build networks and then I got into the public service side of it. And, what I found in the public service side is a lot of people like to talk about broadband. It's pretty easy to talk about. Sexy to talk about too. People like to talk about it because it makes them look good. Hey, it's important, schools, healthcare, all that kind of stuff. But it's not easy to do broadband. And so, it's a different story when you start to talk about the nuts and bolts and how you get it done. And so what I wanted to do is build a model that I think really kind of embraces how broadband gets done and gets done well. Again, it's multiple approaches from multiple areas. It's going to be unique to the area that you're looking at. We are very rural, so we're going to be different than an urban area. But I think it all starts with partnership and planning, and looking at the community and those partnerships and the stakeholders. We look to the state, we look to the feds, we look to the county government, immediately when we got here. That's the folks that we started to partner with. We look to the community and start to talk to them. And then we start to look at the planning aspects of it, identifying what we're going to do, defining the details of how we're going to do it, getting those shovel-ready projects together. And I'll tell you in a minute how this also applies to the, the equity inclusion part of it. Then we start to align the funds, whether it's our own personal funds, whether it's the funds with the state in partnership with middle mile, last mile stuff, whether it's the federal money that's out there. There's a lot of funding out there right now. So you got to go, you got to be prepared to pursue that funding. And then, the hard part about this is building networks. And we've heard from Caltrans and different folks about how they're trying to make life a little bit easier in this. This is a very technical game we play as we build infrastructure, let alone the fact that we're also now looking at huge supply side challenges, and they're just at their inception. This is going to get nutty pretty soon because the money hadn't even hit the street yet. As soon as people start building networks, supplies are going to be challenging to get a hold of. The technology and the manpower to do it is going to be even more of a challenge. So building networks takes partnership as well, and to meet these goals and meet these timelines. There's some very unique timelines that we're looking at that we're going to have to do. But then on top of all this really does sit that digital equity and inclusion component, which is the adoption, the affordability, the skills, the devices. This to me is the most critical component that sticks around and sits on top of this, and it's highlighted on the top of my pyramid for a purpose. It's critical because you can do all this other stuff, but if you can't get people to adopt, you can't people to afford it, and they don't have the devices or skills to use it, doesn't matter what you did underneath that. So this has got to be the overarching, concern for a lot of folks. So as a result, Cpuc Telephone is all in on this. We're all in. So next slide, please. Our service area is unique in that, we are a frontier county. So we have less than 6 people per mile. We're 80% core service. We've got 2,400 square miles. We've got only 4,400 passes in those 2,400 square miles. So we've got a very unique challenge to solve, a problem to solve. But we're going after it, and we're going after it pretty aggressively up here. We're about 60% fiber to the home committed already. Excited to announce that, this company, prior to my arrival, hooked up all of Happy Camp, which is really the home of the Cpuc tribe and their tribal administration, all fiber to the home, everything up there. Then they were hit with that tragedy of the fire, which devastated about 200 homes up there. But because our infrastructure was underground, as was talked about earlier, because of the challenges in this area, we were able to bring those folks back up and bring up the, as they start to repopulate and rebuild, we're able to be there and, at their side to help that happen. There are no other carriers, there's no other competition in here. And so, it is a big challenge to get people to understand the nature of this and what we have to do. And, our county, 49% of the folks are below the household income of California. So we see an affordability component here that's unparalleled. And as a result, we really do go all in on the ACP program and have since it was EBB. So we were in before it was cool. So anyway, next slide, please. So what we've done is we've gone out and we do regular website announcements about ACP. We go and do community tech forums where we talk about ACP and EBB in those areas. And we went a step further. We went into the device side. We're one of very few folks in the state that have pursued devices. It's a little bit of a challenge, but it's one that we found immediately when we went and did some promotion on the device side. We had monster demand. So much so that we ran out, and we're in the process of restocking and resupplying that, because our next set of devices are already spoken for by folks that have been excited about the fact that there is an affordable device out there. That is a key component that people take for granted. Everybody believes they've got devices already, but there are a lot of folks in this area that don't have the devices that have the capability to take advantage of the connectivity that we have. And that's, as you start to talk about some of that scalable, more future-proof connectivity. So we've got about approximately 20% of our qualified homes already participating in this, and our intent is to, really double that number sooner than later. And we're going to be doing that through more community outreach. We've got customer appreciations that we do in our 7 service territories. And so when we roll out to our customer appreciations, we're bringing agents with us, and those agents will be on site there to make certain we can educate and get people engaged and enrolled in the program. So we're all in on this, and we believe that this is probably one of the most critical things that we can do. Next slide, please. We do have the honor of being able to serve a couple of our tribes here in Northern California, the Cpuc and the Quartz Valley tribe. And I'm also happy to announce that both of those tribes will be 100% fiber to the home by the end of this year. So we are committed to ensuring that those folks get the service they deserve, and we support their initiatives that are going on there. And in an effort to do that, as we are working with Eric and his team at Golden State Net on a Middle-Mile project that will bring strong, robust connectivity through to the Yurok and the Hoopa and the folks on down the line there to the west. So we are excited just about the partnerships. We're excited about learning from best practices as we can throughout the state. Again, we're just excited to be part of this, this initiative and collaborate with the state. I'm excited to see the state and its efforts to bring in all voices to the table. So thank you very much. Next slide kind of tells you who I am and where I'm at and how you can get a hold of me if you need to. I'm up here in the woods. So thank you very much for the opportunity today, and sure appreciate this.
Thank you, Russ. Yes, the voice from the actual Northern California. And we so appreciate that you are all in and really have been able to emphasize the importance of, planning all the building you want, but making sure you're planning adoption with it, because at the end of the day, that matters. And clearly you get it. You're one of 2 companies who understands you also have to have a device. As Chris was saying, it's not just ACP. It is also about the device, and you're using that device benefit that's part of the ACP program to really help people make that extra step and make it happen for them. So thank you both very much. Really appreciate the work you're doing and the model that you're setting. So I think we're done. We'll talk with you on questions and answers.
Thank you very much, Susan, Sonny, Chris, and Ross. Really appreciate you kind of driving it home at the end of our formal presentations on the state's Broadband for All program, and just really stressing. And I know folks on, in this gathering know how important broadband adoption is to the overall equation, even though there's a lot of folks here who are focused on, infrastructure deployment and provisioning of services. It's the adoption piece is so critical to getting folks to use the service that's already out there, and where there's a huge opportunity in partnership with the state's efforts and the ISP communities. we'll wrap up. This is the formal Broadband for All Roundtable portion of this event, and just wanted to drive home really that Broadband for All is how the state views its whole suite of programs to address the digital divide, or close the digital divide and foster digital equity throughout the state. You've got the action plan that's really, a number of policy process, partnership development and identification of funding. Really thankful to the legislature and the governor for SB 156 and creating the funding to develop the statewide open access middle-mile network to really address some of the cost constraints to getting last mile service out to some of the hard to reach and in underserved areas, and really the other component to that is the work that the PUC is doing on the last mile and adoption programs that they're supporting to really get those last mile solutions out there. And then can never thank our partners at CETF enough for the work that they're doing across the board on and really being a champion of the Broadband Council for all things broadband, but specifically now for broadband adoption and digital literacy, and just knowing how critical it is to have the partnership at the state level, but then with the private entities and local and regional partners. It is my pleasure now to open it up to the formal sort of question and answer and listening session. Oh, no, thank you. Please go back. I did want to just emphasize, I know that a lot of folks on
Those poll for that person.
Thank you, Elizabeth. So, Mark, this question is first for you, and it's regard to joint build opportunities. And if you can elaborate on how carriers might join in on that effort or participate.
Well, certainly, we need folks to reach out to us. So, kind of looking at what the basis for the Middle-Mile Broadband Initiative is, we've kind of designed, we have a basic design structure that's going to allow us to provide 288 fiber where we build, and 4 conduits, 2-inch conduits, and so we have kind of something that we have a model that we're moving forward in terms of design, but we need you to reach out. Certainly, if anybody's interested, we need to reach out and kind of talk through. We have kind of some decision criteria. We need to make sure we understand the mapping. We need to understand kind of what any potential partners might be proposing in terms of their infrastructure, where they are in the process, right? So let's say, we have to take into account if they're, going into the ground tomorrow, for example. What is that? What would a partnership mean in terms of any permitting? Obviously, that's that I think would be a concern for both of us. And then once kind of what the system is done, what are the what's the ownership status? Where are the access points? I think we have mentioned that in our as we build, we're looking at vaults every 2,500 feet. We're looking at repeater huts, no more than 20, once every 50 miles, right? So that kind of provides a lot of access points, and so I think there's some certainly if you reach out, we have kind of some decision criteria that we're going to need to get information on. So we'll kind of set up a meeting and kind of talk through that and see if there's a possibility to work together there. Again, we've got, this is a network. We need to make sure that it works as a network, and that, we have our design that we've kind of, targeted towards being able to provide a certain level of service. And so we want to see what the effect of working together on that would be. But certainly the opportunity to, as I think we all know, undergrounding is, that's the biggest component of a project. So when we look at any opportunities, to share costs, to kind of to be able to bring that down for both of us, I think we're certainly interested in exploring those opportunities. And like I said, we'll have some initial information we'll need to gather to kind of see, to be able to kind of do a comparison and see what, the benefits versus the costs.
Thank you, Mark. And while we're kind of on this topic of access and carriers and ISPs joining the process, can you reiterate a little bit on the timeline in terms of when an internet service provider would be able to participate and use or lease the new routes that are getting built?
Yeah, so, relative to the federal guidelines, we have to start construction by 2024, by the end of 2024. We have to be done by the end of 2026. And so, as we really expect to start ramping up construction as Caltrans moves forward with its pre-construction efforts, starts to be ready to start going to contract in some cases in 2023 to 2024. I think, we'll have to, that's the time frame we're looking at in terms of starting most of the construction. Similarly, though, if we, as we look out and we're able to identify where we are going to need to lease versus build, I think some of those opportunities are going to potentially be sooner to the extent that infrastructure already exists.
Outstanding. Thank you, Mark. And let's do one more question for you. In terms of the project, there's probably a lot of federal lands that are across the state of California. So what is our process so far of working with the federal government on planning and permitting?
Well, we'll say we have had conversations